If you had, because right now, there's a lot of talk about what the key needle movers are going to be when it comes to actually making America healthy again. Because this is not a trivial endeavor, right? This is not an endeavor that, I think that it's really important that we're talking about this. When you look at public health statistics, we're not doing well. Like 1 in 2 people almost. By the year 2030, 1 in 2 people will be not just overweight, but obese. Half of us have some, either pre-diabetes or full-blown type 2 diabetes, or we're on their way there with insulin resistance and the like. So if you had 60 seconds in front of the whole country and you had to, offer your take on what the simplest paradigm is for healthier eating, what would you say?
That's a great question. I really think it comes down to you can have the biggest impact going from the standard American diet that is full of junk food, often called ultra-processed foods or highly processed foods. Just cutting down on those foods, you don't have to eliminate them, but get down to like 10% of the diet and just eat a variety of nutritious foods, of minimally processed foods. Different words probably mean things to different people. So you may say, to a more health conscious person, you want to have minimally processed foods. If you're talking to a general person, you may say fresh foods, like have a lot of fruits and vegetables. You can have legumes, which are beans, peas, and, pulses. You can have nuts and seeds. You can have fresh meats. You can have eggs. You can have poultry. You can have dairy products. All of that minimally processed generally is going to reduce the chronic disease burden, increase the nutritional content and density of the diet overnight if you were to just make that change, right? The challenge is how do you actually make, when you say move the needle, how do you make a change in that? The food environment that we're surrounded in basically makes it almost impossible to make that transition. You're surrounded by products that are addicting, they're appealing. Once you start eating them, it's hard to stop. There's marketing behind this. There's a whole industry behind this. We live in a society, unfortunately, where people are very lonely. We're working around the clock. We're eating at our desk. We're just grabbing the package so that we can get enough calories to keep going. And that's setting us up for failure. So I think trying to, think about how do we actually do this? Well, can we have more community type things? Can we slow down? Can we cook our own food? I think you're a great chef. You cook a lot of your own food, right? That takes time. That takes a lot of behavior change, and that's not easy. And so I think it's like the answer to how can we transform the diet is pretty simple. If you think about it, it's just how do you actually do it? How do you get people to go from what they're eating now to what we know is going to make a big difference?
It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We often talk about ultra-processed foods. How would you define ultra-processed foods for somebody who's never heard the term?
Yeah. Well, right now, the FDA and the USDA are soliciting comments for a new definition of ultra-processed foods, something that can be maybe a bit more consensus around, because right now there's a lot of debate, right? So ultra-processed foods are generally these combination of industrially processed, extracted ingredients. So rather than having, say, corn or the grain, it's like it's been refined, it's been basically extracted of a lot of the nutrition, and it's these really cheap ingredients that are put together into really palatable, addicting, tasty type of products, right? So they're things like chips, packaged chips, donuts, soda, so these like sugar-sweetened beverages, things like that.
Isn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there not controversy around whether or not ultra-processed foods are actually addictive? Or is that just what I gather from social media, where everything seems like it? You could say the sky is blue, and that becomes a controversy.
Nutrition has a lot of polarization. So, of course, the proponents are, people who are really supportive of this say, look, it's like everything within these products has a problem. So even if it's not this addictive type of property, these additives, the emulsifiers, the artificial, ingredients, colorants, all of those, there's science that says that they can cause different diseases, right? The biggest issue in my view is that what you're talking about, it's like this overconsumption. If these foods, when you look at the studies, the randomized controlled trials, it really does suggest that if your diet is primarily these products, most people overeat. Most of the studies, like 500 to 800 calories a day more than a minimally processed diet. So I think that The controversy really comes on the other side, that folks will say, well, look, there's all sorts of products that you can make at home that are not considered ultra processed, right? You could make cookies. Try taking a plate of cookies. I don't know about you. If I had a plate of chocolate chip cookies, I would probably eat 3,000 calories in one sitting.
Easily, yeah.
Right? And
Same.
that's not necessarily ultra processed, right? And so I think their argument is that, look, it's really about these refined starches, the refined carbohydrates, whether that's the grain that's refined, it's the refined sugar combined with this fat. That doesn't necessarily need to be ultra processed to be harmful. So I think there's really points on both sides. Really, it's like, look, ultra processed foods is a definition that gets, the big picture right. If we were to sort of reduce those foods, I am confident that the health of Americans would improve across the board. But there's a lot of things at the margins, right? Like, it's not just the ultra processing. You can have really refined ingredients. You can have brownies, cake, different things that you make at home that are still going to lead to overeating and metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah, it's so true. Even within the bucket of ultra-processed foods, there does seem to be a signal that some are worse than, and better than others.
Yeah. I mean, one of the worst ones, I think there is probably consensus. The few things there's consensus about is that sugar-sweetened beverages, so just sodas in general, those are one of the worst things. And all of the data kind of aligns. And if you think about it, there's no nutritional value in a soft drink. It's just basically sugar and water. And so that gives you this bolus all at once. It spikes your blood sugar. It doesn't fill you up in any way. So usually you could eat a full meal and you have a Coke and you have 2 Cokes and you have 3, and it's going to give you several hundred extra calories with no real satiety. And so I think if you look at, the range, there's everything from that product to, let's say, an unsweetened soy milk, but there's a soy lecithin in it, an emulsifier. Okay, that's classified as ultra processed. Wildly different, right? The nutrient density of soy milk, high in protein, you have a lot of micronutrients in there as well versus a soda. Now, if those are classified, now that's where the criticism comes, right? I agree. Lumping soda in with unsweetened soy milk is not, it's not the most sophisticated approach. I think there's room for improving and thinking about, well, can we go beyond this ultra processing to really identify what is the most problematic thing with these foods?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear your reaction to an analogy that I often use. I liken the ultra processed designation to the BMI, which is very nonspecific. It works quite well at the population level as a screening tool, but it's not a diagnostic tool.
Exactly.
Like if you were to look at Joe Rogan or The Rock, which is I think the classic example, they might technically, according to the BMI, be obese, but they're clearly not, because
athletes.
They're highly muscled. They've got low body fat percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly with ultra processed foods, I mean, it's like a screening. It's a fairly reliable screening tool, but of course at the margins there are examples of ultra processed foods that exist that probably aren't necessarily bad for you, and in fact could be quite good for you.
Yeah, and I think there's one way of interpreting the NOVA. The NOVA system is what is used by Carlos Monteiro, who designed this sort of classification of ultra-processed foods. If you think about it more at the diet level, it actually holds up a lot better. So you may have one ultra-processed food in the diet for the whole day. Most people can handle that. That's not going to really drive a lot of chronic disease, right? If you have, you had one bag of chips or something in the whole day. Now, what happens is most of the calories that we consume come from these ultra-processed foods. In the U.S., it's about 60%. So in the studies that look at this, you're comparing a diet primarily of ultra-processed foods to a diet primarily minimally processed foods. And I think when you think of it that way, I mean, most of us are not wanting to never have anything that's rewarding or that's a treat or a dessert or something. And if you minimize these types of products and you look at the dietary level, then it's saying, okay, let's keep most of your foods from these minimally processed nourishing foods, 80%, 90%, whatever it is, right? That's going to go a long way. And there should be no real controversy that is going to lead to better health than a diet dominated by these foods. So if we think about it as at the diet level, I think there's probably a bit more consensus than thinking about, well, this one food right here, this soy milk or this tofu, it's that's ultra processed, but that can be part of a healthy diet. And you're going to get into these debates. And I think that one of the ways to keep it sort of a bit more aligned with people and say, look, can we move the needle? Can we make progress here? Is really about what is the overall diet? Can we keep the overall diet pretty much a nourishing diet? And then we have treats and different things on the sides.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.